Now that we're finally to the game theory weeks, that means that your textbook is going to be a bit more of a thing. And you're like, oh my God, thanks. I'm so glad that I spent all this money for 5 weeks of nothing. Well, we're going to hit it plenty, but I think that you'll see that the things that are in the front parts of the book mean more now that you've thought a little bit harder about some of the other things. And actually, I was just browsing through. I hadn't opened the book in a while, and I thought that I might check to see what was in there. Given the existence as uttered forth in the public works of Puncher and Watman of a personal God, qua, with a white beard, qua,
outside time without extension, who from the heights of divine apathia, divine aphambia,
define aphasia,
loves us dearly with some exceptions. For reasons unknown, but time will tell, and suffers like the divine Miranda. With those who, for reasons unknown, but time will tell, are plunged in torment, plunged in fire, whose fire flames if that continues. And who can doubt it will fire the firmament, that is to say, blast hell to heaven, so blue, so still, and calm, so calm, with a calm, which even through intermittent is better than nothing.
but not so fast.
And considering what is more than a result of the labors left unfinished, crowned by
The Academy of Anthropometry,
of the essay and posse of Testu and Cunard, it is established beyond all doubt, all other doubt, than that which clings to labors of men that is a result of the labors unfinished of Testu and Cunard, it is established as hereinafter,
but not so fast.
for reasons unknown, that the result of the public works of Puncher and Watman is established beyond all doubt, that in view of the labors of Fartov and Belcher left
Unfinished.
for reasons unknown of Testu and Cunard, left unfinished, is established what many deny in posse of Testu and Cunard, that man in essay, that man in short, that man in brief, in spite of the strides of alimentation and defecation, wastes and pines, and concurrently, simultaneously, what is more, for reasons unknown, in spite of the strides of physical culture, the practice of sports such as tennis, football, running, cycling, swimming, flying, floating, riding, gliding, conating, camogie, skating, tennis of all kinds, dying, flying, sports of all sorts, autumn, summer, winter, tennis of all kinds, hockey of all sorts, penicillin and Sicambian, a word, I resume flying, gliding,
Golf over 9 and 18 holes.
tennis of all sorts, a word for reasons unknown, and second Fulham Clapham, namely concurrently, simultaneously, what is more, for reasons unknown, but time will tell, fades away.
I resume.
Fulham Clapham, a word, the dead lost per head since the death of Bishop Berkeley being to the tune of 1 inch 4 ounce per head, approximately by and large, more or less, to the nearest decimal good measure, round figure, stark naked in the stocking feet, in Connemara, and a word for reasons unknown. No matter what matters of facts are there, and considering what is more, much more grave than in the light of the labors lost of Steinway and Peterman, it appears what is much more grave than in the light of the labors lost of Steinway and Peterman in the plains and the mountains, by the sea, by the rivers running, water, fire, and the air the same, and then the earth, namely the air, and then the earth, and the great cold, the great dark, the air, and the earth, abode of stones, and the great cold.
Alas.
Alas, in the year of their Lord 600 and something, the air, the earth, the sea, the earth, abode of stones, and the great deeps of the great cold on sea, on land, and in the air, I resume. For reasons unknown,
And in spite of the tennis.
the facts are there, but time will tell, I resume. Alas, alas, on and short and fine, on abode of stones, who can doubt it, but I resume.
But not so fast. I resume.
The skull, fading, and concurrently simultaneously, what is more, for reasons unknown, in spite of the tennis, on, the beard, the flames, the tears, the stone, so blue, so calm. Alas, alas, on the skull, in Connemara, in spite of the tennis, the labors unbanded, left unfinished, graver still, abode of stones, and a word, I resume. Alas, alas, abandoned, unfinished. The skull, in Connemara.
In spite of the tennis.
The skull, alas, the stones, Cunard, tennis, the stones, so calm, Cunard.
Unfinished. Hey everybody, welcome to PS 231. Listen, I know that you could see the book within a book, but the book within a book is going to be part of the book that we're talking about today. Our book of fables has multiple subbooks within it. Alas, the time lost, etc. We are now over 1/3 of the way through our class in game theory, and so I thought it would be a fun idea to talk about games. I know, right? It seems like we've learned so much, but we've actually just been getting the requisite muscles that it takes to learn the things that you're here to learn. And it's exciting for me because a lot of the things that I'll be showing you today will feel a lot more straightforward. The stuff that I'll be showing you today is actually week 1 of most undergraduate game theory classes. Am I still sweating on account of this monologue? That monologue killed me. I got the bright idea to do that about 30 seconds before I hit record on the camera, and I'm pretty sure I regret it. But I regret nothing! What's nice, because of the fact that we're going to be doing sort of week 1 feeling material, we'll be doing week 1 feeling material, is that if you feel like you've been struggling, which I don't think is too much of an if, but today is the day where you get to hit the reset button a little bit. We'll be starting the enterprise from scratch, but you will be stronger because of the walls that you've been running through. You are far more prepared to do the things that we'll be doing today because of what you've done yesterday. That's the whole point of accumulating knowledge slowly in something like a flipped classroom. So game theory takes what we've been doing and it makes it multi-person. So the first 4 weeks, the first week was just what is math, And then weeks 2, 3, and 4 were how does an isolated decision maker figure out what to choose or what to want or whatever. We'll avoid the differences between those verbs. So how does a single contemplative competent decision maker act in isolation? And then last week we started to flirt with the idea of multiple decision makers by talking about bargaining and optimality. But we never imposed the full-on strategic interdependence. The fact that the utility functions jive together between player 1 and player 2, that doesn't necessarily mean that what they were doing was game theoretic. What we'll be doing today is game theoretic in the sense that my utility and your utility, they depend not just on our own choices or what a social planner imposed on us, but rather the combinations of our choices, okay? This is also a week where the fable part of the enterprise really kicks in. A game is, to a certain degree, just a particular way to tell a story. And if you see it that way, then what we go through, it might seem a little bit trivial sometimes, and that's kind of what I'm gunning for. If it feels trivial to you, then we can turn up the volume as we go. But the enterprise is not trivial, even though we're doing something that sounds kind of trivial by giving it the name game theory. So we give it that name, and that makes it sound trivial to begin with. And then I'm going to be telling you this from a particularly frivolous point of view, as you may have gathered by now. And so you might think that this is all kind of silly. And it is kind of silly, but it also isn't. There's a lot going on in game theory, and it remains one of the dominant methodologies within the social sciences for a reason. Even though you'll be getting a very introductory treatment today, I hope that you won't think that this is where the story ends. This is a very deep book of fables that you might have to learn a couple of arcane languages to make it all the way through. And by arcane languages, I mean topology. So given that I've already depleted myself of all the energy with that stupid introduction, and given the fact that we have a lot of fun stuff to get through, and given the fact that I'd rather keep you in just a little bit of suspense, I'm not going to say anything more, except for go get yourself some liquids, get yourself ready, strap yourself in, get yourself comfy, put on some pants that have elastic involved, and we'll get to it. In the A block, I'm going to tell you 2 fables that don't seem the same but are. That was easy. I would say more, but that's actually what I'm going to do. And I don't want to tell you too much more because I want you to be a little bit in the dark. I've already spoiled the punchline a little bit by saying that they're the same thing, but I don't mind saying that to you because you're smart. You'll figure it out. In the B block, I'll tell you a bunch of other stories that aren't the same thing. They'll look the same, but they won't be the same thing. And then the C block, I'll tell you a third story that's a little bit more complicated, but not too. So you have that to look forward to. I swear, I'm locked in. This is going to be a good one. You think that I don't have it today because I just spent all my energy on that and because I refuse to tell you what's going to happen and because I refuse the fact to do an introduction. But what I want to tell you is this is all because I'm that locked in. I am completely prepared to send the things that are in my head into your head. This medium is just the right way to do it. You're going to be seeing a lot of stories. There's going to be a lot of things happening. You're going to get a little bit dizzy, I think, if I'm doing this all right. But you're also going to be just drowning in the awesome waters of frivolous storytelling in the form of mathematical rigor. What? You'll see. Let's get started. So here in the A block, I want to tell you 2 stories. Once upon a time, there were 2 shepherds. I'm a shepherd, you're a shepherd. We are 2 shepherds. And so the shepherds, who are independent, woke up that day and decided to take their sheep to a big village lawn, right? So the idea is that this predated the days where people had their own individual lawns or something. There was just a big village green. And the question was, what would happen when the shepherds brought their sheep there to graze? And the basic idea underneath this story is that if both shepherds allow their sheep to eat all that they want of the village lawn, there won't be any village lawn left, and it'll be really bad. But the shepherds also want to make sure that their sheep get enough food. I mean, have you ever seen a sheep? A sheep doesn't stop eating. Sheep love eating, as do professors. And so, did I just say sheeps instead of sheep? And then I called myself a professor. So the shepherds both want their sheep to get a lot of food, but if they both have a lot of food for their sheep at the village lawn will be decimated and there won't be any way to feed the sheep moving forward. And these seem like real facts. Sheep like food, but if too many people use too much of the food, then there is no food tomorrow. Those both seem like reasonable stylized facts to start a story with, right? And so the idea is I want to take this story, which seems plausible, it has a couple of real world features that we're trying to incorporate, and turn it into something that we can assign utility numbers to. But notice that we can't make it just a matter of what each individual shepherd chooses. The shepherds are no longer like the people in weeks 2 through 4. The shepherds have a new kind of problem because what happens depends not just on their own choices, but also on what the other shepherd does. In particular, if both shepherds allow their sheep to have a lot of food, then both suffer, right? So their decisions are now strategically interdependent. These two shepherds, they have strategically interdependent choices. Let me show you what I mean. The way that I'm going to frame this is that shepherd 1 can do one of two things. They can eat a lot of food or a little food. And the same for shepherd 2. I'm going to put that into what's called an action set, A sub I, for 1 or for 2. And the idea is I want to think about all possible combinations of those actions, the Cartesian product of these two sets, the set of all possible combinations of shepherd 1's choices and shepherd 2's choices. Okay? I'm going to put these into a column. It could be a lot, it could be a lot, a little, it could be a little, a lot, it could be a little, a little. And each of those is a different strategic outcome. Each of those influences the shepherds in differential ways. And the way that we tap into those differential ways is to give each shepherd a utility column. And I'm just going to record those two stylized facts that we talked about. 1, you would rather have your sheep eat a lot than a little. And 2, you prefer the world where the two sheep eat a little to the one where they both eat a lot. Because if they both eat a lot, then you use up all the resources. So given that, I'm gonna make these two columns, shepherd 1's utility and shepherd 2's utility. But the idea here is that the inputs are going to be a combination of choices. What shepherd 1 did and what shepherd 2 did. Now let's think this through from shepherd 1's standpoint. Shepherd 1's favorite outcome is the one where they get to eat a lot of food. Their sheep gets to eat a lot of food, and the other shepherd hasn't eaten so much food that things are spoiled, right? So their very favorite outcome is a lot, a little. I'm going to give that 4 happiness points. This is where the interdependencies kicking in. Notice that the input is a combination of choices, and the way that we assign utilities to that is dependent on the underlying strategic story that we're trying to tell. That's the whole point. So we'll say that their second favorite outcome is a little, and I'm going to give that 3 happiness points. We're going to say that their third favorite outcome is the one where both eat a lot, because at least you've got your sheep had a lot that day. If you knew that the other shepherd was going to eat a lot, you'd eat a lot too. So that's going to be 2 happiness points. And then the worst case scenario is you showed restraint and didn't let your sheep eat very much, and the other shepherd took advantage of you and ate a lot. So I'm going to give that 1 happiness point. So if you wanted to, you could envision this in a doodle, right? You have 4 dots in a doodle. A lot, a lot, a little, a little, a lot, a little, a little. And I just told you a particular story that means you put a particular set of arrows over those things. Now it's the same idea, but now the alternatives are interdependent and you only control some aspect of the choice. You don't control exactly which dot you get like you did with Coke, Pepsi, Sprite. And it's not for uncertain reasons like with lottery tickets. Now it's because somebody else is making a relevant decision too. Now let's think about shepherd 2. Well, shepherd 2 has the same motivations, but they kind of work in reverse. Shepherd 2's favorite outcome is the one where shepherd 1 eats a little and shepherd 2 eats a lot. Their second favorite outcome is the one where they both eat a little because at least there's still food there tomorrow. Their third favorite outcome is the one where both shepherds ate a lot because at least they didn't get screwed over like they do in their least favorite outcome, which is the one where they eat a little and shepherd 1 eats a lot, a little. So shepherd 2's preferences are not the same as shepherd 1's preferences, and both shepherds only get to control so much of the interaction. That's what makes a game, right? I guess you could play solitaire, and that's a game, but we're talking about games of a more strategic form. Now, this isn't the usual way of conveying all this information, right? So right now, I've got action sets for both shepherds. I've got 4 rows. I've got 2 utility columns. There's a more succinct way to show you the underlying story, particularly when we have 2 shepherds or 2 players more broadly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little matrix, okay? And it's going to have 2 rows and 2 columns. And the idea is that I'm the row shepherd. I control which row we find ourselves in. I'm shepherd 1. And you're shepherd 2. You determine which column we find ourselves in. I'm going to be ambidextrous now. I swear. So I could eat a little or I could eat a lot. And you could eat a little or you could eat a lot. So I've got 2 rows, 2 columns. And notice that that gives me 4 cells in this little matrix. And now what I can do is I can put those numbers that we just worked our way through into these cells, the appropriate cell for any given number, and that'll make it a little bit easier to see what's going on. So let's think this through from shepherd 1's standpoint first. So shepherd 1's very favorite outcome is the one where they eat a lot, the bottom row, and shepherd 2 eats a little. That's just right over here. And so I'm just going to put a 4 there because that was shepherd 1's favorite outcome. 4 happiness points for a lot, a little. Shepherd 1's second favorite outcome was the one where they ate a little and shepherd 2 ate a little. So I'm going to put a 3 there. Shepherd 1's third favorite outcome was the one where they ate a lot and shepherd 2 ate a lot, right? So now I'm meeting down here and I'll put 2 happiness points there for shepherd 1. And finally, shepherd 1's least favorite outcome is the one where they eat a little and shepherd 2 eats a lot. And so I'll put a 1 happiness point there for shepherd 1. Now, the convention is in a game like this is to put the row players' numbers first and the column players' numbers second. So I'll put commas after all those numbers now. And then I'm going to put in column players' numbers second. Just as an aside, there's an excellent chance that you will occasionally screw up which number comes first. Is it row player that comes first or column player? It's just a convention. Conventions take time to learn. I'm telling you the convention now, but that doesn't mean that I think that you're going to internalize that the first time. You're going to have to screw up a few times. You're going to have to get corrected a few times. That doesn't make you stupid. That makes this a convention. And the thing with conventions is they have to be taught because they're just some arbitrary decision that was made, not for any particular reason other than sheer convenience. So shepherd 2's favorite outcome is the one where they eat a lot and shepherd 1 eats a little, right? So at this cell, I'm going to put 4 happiness points for shepherd 2. That's the second number now. Shepherd 2's second favorite outcome is the one where they ate a little and shepherd 1 ate a little. So that I'm going to put 3 happiness points there. Shepherd 2's third favorite outcome is the one where both eat a lot. So I'll put 2 happiness points there. Right there, I think. And then their least favorite outcome is the one where shepherd 1 ate a lot and shepherd 2 did the restrained thing and ate a little. So I'll put 1 happiness point there. This is your very first game. This is a game. And this whole story is a well-known game called The Story of the Tragedy of the Commons, where the question is, how do we ensure that a common pool resource, like a beautiful lawn, how do we ensure that that is provided when every individual has the incentive to go use the resource, but if everybody goes and uses the resource, then it all gets used up? Right? This is what is called a collective action problem. What makes a collective action problem? A collective action problem is that everybody would agree that they don't want to overuse something in particular, some resource, some lawn for the sheep, but every individual has the incentive to shirk. Every individual has some individual level incentive to screw the whole thing up. That's a collective action problem. We would all benefit if we did something, but everybody has some individual incentive to not do that. Notice that the thing with the collective action problem is that there's some Pareto arguments going on. So let me just put this into a utility imputation space like we had before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put shepherd 1's utility here and shepherd 2's utility here, the 2 axes, just like last week. We've got 4 outcomes. I can just put them into space. Outcome 1 will be the a lot. So if they both eat a lot, that's 2 happiness points for shepherd 1 and 2 happiness points for shepherd 2. If they both eat a little, if neither shepherd overindulges, then that's 3 happiness points apiece. If shepherd 1 eats a lot and shepherd 2 eats a little, then we're not very high up, but we're pretty far over. That's 4 happiness points for shepherd 1 and 1 happiness point for shepherd 2. And the same in the reverse, we go over 1 for shepherd 1 and we go up 4 for shepherd 2 in the situation where it's a little and a lot. Notice anything? We've got a Pareto-dominated outcome. A lot is Pareto-dominated by a little. There are 3 Pareto optimal outcomes, a little, a lot, and a little, a lot. Those form a Pareto frontier. And we see that a lot is living underneath that Pareto frontier. It is Pareto dominated. That's what a collective action problem looks like if you think about it in terms of pennies. So this tragedy of the commons is a rather famous story, but it's not as famous as the other version of the story. So let me tell you another story. Once upon a time, there were two suspects. I'm a suspect. You're a suspect. We are two suspects. What happened was we were doing some thieving, right? We went to Best Buy and I was trying to steal a PS5 and you were trying to steal an Xbox or whatever, and we got caught. The thing is, the police don't know whether or not we are part of some larger racket, okay? And so what they want information more than they want to bust us for this particular video game console thieving. So what they do is they put us into separate interrogation chambers, right? So I'm in an interrogation chamber and you're in an interrogation chamber. We're in two interrogation chambers, separate. We can't see one another. And so in each of these chambers, the detective comes in. I feel like I'm on Law and Order. So the detective comes in and says, here's the deal. We have enough to get you for a misdemeanor. But if you can provide incriminating evidence on your accomplice, then we'll put them in jail and you'll go free. And so the basic idea here is that if neither tattles, then they get nailed for a misdemeanor. If one tattles and the other doesn't, then the tattler goes free and the person that got tattled on goes to jail for the rest of their life. And if both tattle, then we go to jail for a pretty long time, longer than the misdemeanor, but not as long as the rest of our lives, because there's two of us. In other words, I can put this into another little spreadsheet where the idea here is that we can either both stay silent, I can stay silent and you can tattle, I can tattle and you stay silent, or we can both tattle. And so my utility's over that. I'm the row prisoner. My favorite outcome is the one where I tattle and you don't. My second favorite outcome is the one where neither of us tattle and we just get nailed for the misdemeanor. My third favorite outcome is the one where we both tattle, because at least I'm not going to jail for the rest of my life, and maybe we could be friends there, even though we both tattle on one another. And my least favorite outcome is the one where you tattled, and I know that you're somewhere playing something on your Xbox, and I'm sitting in jail playing Oregon Trail on a Macintosh 2E. Before you were born, there was a very beige computer called the Macintosh 2E. It was a good computer. I'm pretty sure. I'd like to think how short of an amount of time I could record on this thing on a Macintosh 2E. I think I would probably need trillions of Macintosh 2Es in order to make that work. Now let's think about you. You're the second prisoner. So your favorite outcome is the one where you tattle and I stay silent. Your second favorite outcome is the one where neither of us tattles. Your third favorite outcome is the one where we both tattle. And your least favorite outcome is the one where I tattle and you don't. So we both have a 4-3-2-1, and that 4-3-2-1 happens to be very similar to what we've been talking about up to this point. So let's just go down and put in the matrix just for practice. Repetition makes us get better at things. I'm row prisoner, you're column prisoner. Oh boy, that's very dramatic. I can stay silent or I can tattle. And you can stay silent or you can tattle. If we both stay silent, then that's the one where we both just get nailed for the misdemeanor. 3 happiness points for me, 3 happiness points for you. In the world where I tattle and you stay silent, well, I get 4 happiness points because I get to go home, and you have 1 happiness point because you're in jail for the rest of your life. In the world where I stay silent and you tattle, it's the same situation in reverse. 1 happiness point for me for being in jail, and 4 happiness points for you for being home in your soft pants. Finally, 2 happiness points apiece if we both tattle. This is a rather famous story as well. It's called The Prisoner's Dilemma. Just as an aside, notice that it's prisoners, then apostrophe. It's not a game theoretic dilemma if it's one prisoner's dilemma. The whole point is it's the 2 prisoners. That's what makes game theory game theory. Now notice that these 2 stories are both memorable. 2 shepherds figuring out how much to let their sheep go graze in a public lawn, and 2 prisoners deciding whether or not to tattle on one another when they've been given some difficult choice by some pretty intelligent sounding detectives. These 2 fables stick in your head. The Prisoner's Dilemma and the Tragedy of the Commons are famous for a particular reason. Now, before we move on to more stories, let's just talk about what makes a game a game. I just want to give you a formal definition of a game. What makes a game a game? 3 things make a game. 3 things. I promise that 3 things make a game. Thing 1, you need players. We need some set of players. right? So in the tragedy of the commons, it was shepherd 1 and shepherd 2. In the prisoner's dilemma, it was suspect 1 and suspect 2. In general, I will work hard to make sure that we call the relevant set of actors N. Capital N will be the set of players. You'll notice that that's an important thing that happens in real stories, not just the stories that we tell mathematically. As an example, consider my favorite play, which is what I was reading from in the introduction. So this is Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett. And it, like any play, has dramatis personae, the players that are part of the story, right? And in this particular story, the dramatis personae is a very short list. Estragon, Vladimir, Lucky, Pozzo, and a boy. Estragon, Vladimir, Lucky, Pozzo, and a boy. I was reading Lucky's big monologue at the end of Act 1. Every game needs its players. Every play needs its dramatis personae. I really am telling you fables. Thing 2. Every player has to be given some set of actions to choose over. Capital A sub I will be player I's available actions. So in the tragedy of the commons game, it was eat a lot or eat a little. In the prisoner's dilemma, it was stay silent or tattle. Okay? Now these can be big sets. I can give you all sorts of different options, but in these 2x2 games, 2 players each with 2 actions, typically these will just be binary sets, doubletons. So right now we've got players who can do things, right? That sounds like the beginning of a story. It wouldn't be a very interesting story. I would challenge you to come up with an interesting story that doesn't have players and things they can do. And then comes the game theory part. So what the whole thing here is the following. Their utility functions are defined on the Cartesian product of their action sets. Right? So every player comes with a utility function, U sub I, that's player I's utility function, which reads in the Cartesian product of the action sets and spits out a happiness number. Tattle, tattle gives you 3. A lot, a little gives you 4. And that's it. What makes a game is 3 things. Who are the players? What can they do? And what do they want? You can tell a whole lot of stories that way, right? So what we've seen here is that we can take a whole lot of different strategic interactions, whether it's common pool resources and how to manage them, or potentially sticky strategic situations and how to navigate them, and a lot of other things, public good provision, arms races, all sorts of things that we'll see throughout the class. And all of them have a similar structure in the sense that the story that we can tell with them winds up with this collective action problem looking kind of thing. They all have this incentive to do what's best for yourself, even though everybody would agree that it would be best if nobody would do that. We don't want to overindulge, but everybody has the impetus to do so. So there's a reason this is all very famous. This immediately highlights the importance of a game theoretic approach. If you can't think about strategic interdependence by taking the Cartesian product of all these action sets and then imposing utilities over those, then it's very difficult to tell a story. You don't have enough apparatus to tell this rich story of 2 shepherds and their sheep, or 2 prisoners and their decision to stay silent. You need all this apparatus. You need game theory. So I just want to keep flying through the Book of Fables. So over in the B block, I'll have a bunch of other stories to tell you. I'm really looking forward to that. So I'll see you there. So here in the B block, I just want to plow through some more fables. Let's start with one of my very favorite games, or one of my favorite classes of games. I think that this is one of the most underappreciated aspects of strategic interdependence, and I think that it's something that if we all focus a little bit harder on it, then the world might be a little bit nicer some of the time. But that's just a personal belief, and I could be wrong. So what I want to talk about is a game of coordination. And the way I'm going to tell the story is as follows. Once upon a time, there were 2 drivers. I'm a driver, you're a driver. We are 2 drivers. We're going in opposite directions on Green Street, okay? You're going toward the fun on Green Street, and I'm going as fast as I can away from the fun on Green Street. Oh my God, I have to get home and watch the Great British Baking Show. Who could be thinking about fun at a time like this? So here's the idea. We live in a lawless society. Like I said, it's Green Street. So we're living in a lawless society where we don't know what side of the road to drive on. Again, this is remarkably accurate for Urbana at the wrong evening on Friday night. So, in other words, I've got an action set for what side of the road I can drive on, as do you. I can drive on the left side of the road or the right side of the road. And you can drive on the left side of the road or the right side of the road. I'll skip the Excel spreadsheets from here on and we'll just talk in terms of the matrices. So I can drive on the left or I can drive on the right. And you can drive on the left or you can drive on the right. And the idea is that we just kind of want to get where we're going. I'm not sure if you noticed, but there's nothing special about the left or the right side when you drive. And some of you have driven in other contexts. If you drive in the United Kingdom, then I hope you're driving on the left. And if you drive in the United States, I hope you're driving on the right. But we'll talk about where that comes from next week. Now, if we both drive on the left side, let's just start right here. If we both drive on the left side, then I'm on the left side of the road my way, and you're on the left side of the road your way, which means that we're not going to hit one another, right? So if I'm driving on my left and you're driving on your left, then we just drive past one another. I'm describing what happens every day, trillions of times, right? So we drive past one another, we get where we're going, you get to the fun, I get to the Great British Baking Show, 1 happiness point for me, 1 happiness point for you. Similarly, if we both drive on the right side of the road, then I'm on my right, you're on your right, we go right past one another. That's pretty awesome. You're at the fun, I'm at the baking, 1 happiness point for you, 1 happiness point for me. 1 happiness point. 1, 1, 1, 1. Now suppose that I drove on the left side of the road and you drove on the right side of the road. Wait, listen. So I'm on my left and I'm driving this way, and you're on your right and you're driving this. Oh, we're going to be in a fiery car crash if we're not careful here. 0 happiness points for me, 0 happiness points for you. That's the beauty of utility functions, right? Utility functions means that I can say getting where you're going is 1 happiness point, fiery car crash is 0 happiness points, and I don't have to land on that too long. The only idea is that it's better to get where you're going than to be in a car crash. That's all I really am trying to model here. I think you would agree with me on that. And the same goes in reverse. If I drive on the right and you drive on the left, now we're 0 happiness points apiece. So this is a game of coordination. We would like to coordinate. We both stand to benefit if we can choose a side of the road where we don't drive into the other person. We both stand to gain. And unlike in The Prisoner's Dilemma and The Tragedy of the Commons, it's not like there's any individual level incentive to cheat or anything, right? We both want to be on the left side or the right side. So this is a game of coordination where the idea is nobody particularly cares what side of the road we drive on. We just want to get where we're going. I think you would agree with me that that's pretty much how driving works. Then again, I've seen some of you out there on Friday nights on Green Street. No, I haven't. No, I haven't. That sounds creepy. Now, there's a related idea. So notice here that sort of my preferences don't, like we kind of agree on everything here. We just want to get where we're going. However, there's a related game that sort of allows us to focus on coordination, but where we can get to have somewhat heterogeneous preferences over the outcomes. So let me tell you a story related to the coordination game called Bach-Stravinsky. Once upon a time, there were 2 musical companions. I'm a musical companion. You're a musical companion. We are 2 musical companions. And we both love music. That's why we're musical companions. And assume that in Champaign, Urbana, there are 2 great concert halls. We'll just assume. And the idea is that they're both showing a concert at the same time that day. And the basic idea is that we love to watch music together because we're musical companions, but we don't agree which show we like. Okay? And so the basic idea is that over in Champaign, where they're super fancy and stuff, tonight's concert will be focused on the music of Johann Sebastian Bach. And over in Urbana, where things are a little bit edgier, the music of tonight's concert will be by Igor Stravinsky. Bach-Stravinsky. That's the basic idea, is that there's 2 different shows, and we're going to say that I love Bach and you love Stravinsky. But we both love watching together, but I prefer the Bach show to the Stravinsky show, and you prefer the Stravinsky show to the Bach show. And obviously, since we're making simultaneous choices, the idea here is that we haven't had a chance to talk to one another about which show to go to. Assume that we don't have cell phones and we can't text because we're the kind of people that go to classical concerts, so chances are good that we don't have phones and we can't text. So we don't have phones and we can't text. We just have to drive to a show. It's 6:59 and it's time for us to drive to one of the shows. Okay? So I can drive to the Bach show or to the Stravinsky show. And you can drive to the Bach show or to the Stravinsky show. Now let's work this through. I love Bach. And so I would like, my favorite outcome is the one we're at the Bach show together. So that's this one right here. I go to Bach and you go to Bach. I'm sure I just missed all that. So we're both at Bach. I get 2 happiness points because we're not only are we at a show together, not only have we coordinated, but also we're at my favorite. There's all this beautiful counterpoint, right? I've got toccata and fugue just, it's resonating. I can hear all the little things. The synesthesia is firing because of all the little things happening in those inner voices. Oh my God, the counterpoint's amazing. And you're like, well, that's pretty okay. I mean, I'm finding this rhythmic structure a little bit archaic, but I'm just happy to be there with my musical companion. So 1 happiness point for you, 2 happiness points for me. Meanwhile, if we both go to Stravinsky show, so if I go to Stravinsky and you go to Stravinsky, now you're nerding out to all this crazy polyrhythm, right? I mean, there's all these things are happening and all the music is super dense and primal. The harmonic structure, I think, is a little bit, I could come up with that harmonic structure if I wanted to. Oh boy, open fifths. Great job, Igor. But the polyrhythm is pretty badass. So you're nerding out on the polyrhythm and I'm saying, boy, I don't like all this harmony. 1 happiness point for me, 2 happiness points for you. So we want to coordinate, but we don't agree about where we want to coordinate. I want to go to Bach and you want to go to Stravinsky. This happens all the time. Not Bach or Stravinsky, but this happens all the time. Chipotle or Potbelly. What about off the diagonal? Well, if I go to Bach and you go to Stravinsky, yeah, I love Bach, but I can't stand to be without my musical companion. And similarly, you love Stravinsky, but you just don't, it's just not the same. It just isn't the same without me by your side. 0 happiness points for me, 0 happiness points for you. It's the musical equivalent of a fiery car crash. Similarly, if I go to Stravinsky and you go to Bach, 0 happiness points apiece. It just isn't the same without our musical companion there by our side. So coordination and Bach or Stravinsky are similar in the sense that we want to be on the diagonal. We want to be on the main diagonal, whether it's left, left, right, right, or Bach, Bach, Stravinsky, Stravinsky. We don't want to be off the diagonal. We don't want to be in a fiery car crash, and we don't want to be listening to music without our musical companion. So there's a similar structure, but in Bach or Stravinsky, we add this heterogeneous preferences over the outcomes kind of thing. Okay? And you can think about it as the following. As the bump that you get for watching your favorite composer decreases, this essentially turns into a coordination game, right? Just a 1-1 kind of thing. If that bump that you get, if you don't care that much about seeing your favorite composer versus your second favorite composer, then if that 1 goes to like 1.0001, then we're very close to a regular coordination game where we're trying to just drive on the right side of the road, correct side of the road. But there's a similar structure, right? But it's not quite the same thing as in Tragedy of the Commons or Prisoner's Dilemma, where they were identical games. These are different games. They incorporate different features of the real world, but you can imagine one being similar to the other in a close by kind of sense. Now, let me show you kind of the opposite idea. Let's talk about a game of anti-coordination. And here we'll go back to the baseball example that we talked about in week 3. So once upon a time, there were 2 baseball players. I'm a baseball player, you're a baseball player. We are 2 baseball players. I'm a pitcher, you're a hitter. I throw the ball, you hit the ball. And let's suppose that I've got 2 pitches. I've got a fastball, it goes real fast, or I've got a curveball, it loops. And I make my decision about what to throw, and at roughly the same time, you make your decision about what to be looking for. Okay, you either want to be like waiting for a fastball or waiting for a curveball, and I'm either throwing a fastball or a curveball. So in other words, if I'm row baseball player and you're column baseball player, I can either throw a fastball or throw a curveball. You can either wait for fastball or wait for curveball. You would like to be sitting on the right pitch. You would like to be awaiting the right pitch. If I threw a fastball and that's what you're waiting for, home run. And if I threw a curveball and you were waiting for a curveball, home run. But if I throw a curveball and you're waiting for a fastball, strike out. That's not how you say that, but it got poetic. And you're like, yeah, that intro wasn't very poetic, fat man. So in other words, let's say it is as follows. If I throw a fastball and you sit fastball, then I get -1 happiness points and you get 1 happiness point. So -1 for looking like an idiot. I threw a fastball and you hit it out of the park. 1 happiness point for you because you hit it out of the park. Similarly, if I throw a curveball and you were sitting curveball, right? Now, -1 happiness points for me because I look like an idiot, and 1 happiness point for you because you look pretty awesome. Now, it's the opposite off the main diagonal, right? So if I throw a fastball and you were sitting curveball, then it whizzes right by you. And I get 1 happiness point for the strikeout, and you get -1 happiness points for the strikeout. And similarly, if I throw a curveball and you swing real fast for a fastball, and then the ball leisurely finds its way to the catcher's mitt, 1 happiness point for me, -1 happiness points for you. So this is our baseball interaction, right? You'll notice that the pitcher and the pitcher doesn't want to be at the same place, and the hitter wants to be at the same place. There's another game that's well known in the literature that's related to this. It's called matching pennies, where the idea is, this used to be something that people used to do. This was like a fun game where we could each have a penny, and then I can either put it heads or tails up secretly, and you could either put it heads or tails up secretly. And then if they're both heads, I get both the pennies. And if they're both tails, I get both the pennies. And if they're opposite, then you get both the pennies. So I want them to be the same, fastball, fastball, curveball, curveball. I'm the hitter. And you want them to be different. And so matching pennies is the more famous example, but I thought that we would do a little bit of a tie-in with the baseball example. Hitting is a lot like matching pennies. Same with penalty kicks for you soccer fans. The kicker would like to kick the ball where the keeper is not, and the keeper would like to be where the ball is going to go. So these games we're going to set aside for a while, these games of anti-coordination where one person wants to be at the same place and the other one doesn't. We're going to set them aside for a couple of weeks because it turns out that there's a very particular interesting thing underneath their structure that will require a little bit more advanced apparatus to study them. Let me show you another game that I love very much. It's called the stag hunt. So the notion from the stag hunt came from Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So in one of Jean-Jacques Rousseau's discourses, in particular, I forget the name of it off the top of my head, but it's like Discourses on Why Men Are Unequal or something. I should look this up, but I'll just put it on the screen. So there. Jean-Jacques Rousseau tells a fable in this discourse, which I swear I read in grad school, but I just don't remember the name because, the titles are a little bit longer in those old books. So once upon a time, there were 2 hunters. I'm a hunter. You're a hunter. We are 2 hunters. And we can either try to go get a big stag together, which would require both of our attention, or we can each just kind of go after a hare by ourselves, a rabbit. And the basic idea is we both are needed to get a stag, but you could go get a hare by yourself if you wanted to, right? So I can go hunting for stag or I can go hunting for hare. And you go hunting for stag or you can go hunting for hare. Now, if we both go for a stag, if we coordinate on hunting for a stag, then 2 happiness points for me, 2 happiness points for you because we both have a stag. That's pretty awesome. Stags are cool. You could eat for a whole winter. Now, here's the thing. If you peel off and go get a hare by yourself and the other person was going for stag, now they look like an idiot because they can't get the stag by themselves, and here you are with your little rabbit, okay? So in particular, if I go hunting for stag and you go hunting for hare, then I get 0 happiness points because I got nothing, and you get 1 happiness point because you got a hare. We're storytelling. You see the stories? There's all sorts of stories. If I go hunting for hare and you go hunting for stag, then 1 happiness point for me and 0 happiness points for you. And because there's plenty of rabbits in the world, if we both go hunting for hare, we both get 1 happiness point apiece. So the stag hunt has this interesting thing going on in its structure where we would like to coordinate, but we both have this tempting peel off. It's not quite the same thing as a collective action problem because it's not like what does better for me necessarily does worse for you. Like if I tattle on you and you stay silent, then things are really awesome for me and things are really sucky for you. Here it's like you peel off. We could both peel off if we wanted to without screwing the other person over, other than they might come back empty-handed. But they could go hunting for a hare by themselves too if they wanted. Just to see what that looks like, consider a utility imputation space on the stag hunt. Right? So if we both go for a stag, then that's 2 happiness points apiece. If we both go for a hare, that's down to 1-1. But then the 1-1 also Pareto dominates the fact that it could be 0-1 or 1-0. Right? These utility imputation drawings, these penny drawings are a useful way to see the underlying structure of the game. I got one more fable for you of this type, and it's probably my second favorite in the whole thing. I saved it for last for a reason. So this game is very well known. This is used a lot in international relations, although I think it probably works in many conflictual situations. The name of this game is Chicken. You can tell why it's my favorite game now. So, once upon a time, there were two angst-ridden adolescents. I'm an angst-ridden adolescent. You're an angst-ridden adolescent. We are two angst-ridden adolescents. And we want to show off how awesome we are. There's a lot of ways that angst-ridden adolescents try to show off how awesome they are, but there's a particular way that angst-ridden adolescents show off how awesome they are that was in a famous movie from the 1950s called Rebel Without a Cause, starring James Dean and some other guy. I'll let you be James Dean in this one, and I'll be some other guy. And I'll look up the biographical information of some other guy, and Editor Rob will flash it on the screen. So in order to show off how awesome we are, if we're doing this as in Rebel Without a Cause, we both get into a car. I'm in a car, you're in a car, we're in two cars. But we're not going to be like coordination game this time. This time, in order to show off who's more awesome, we both start driving the cars toward one another at very high speeds. Right? So I'm driving my car toward you, and you're driving your car toward me. And so the basic idea is as follows, in terms of who wins and who loses. Suppose that I swerve and you keep going straight, right? So I swerve and you go straight. The idea is, now you look totally tough and badass, and I look like a chicken. You look awesome, I look like a chicken. So that means that you win the game and I lose the game. Similarly, if you swerve first, now I look awesome and you look like a chicken. Okay? By the way, never do this. Promise me you'll never do this. If we both swerve at the same time, then we'll say that it's a tie. Neither of us is like a full-fledged chicken, but neither of us looks all that awesome because we both swerved, but at least we get to tell the tale. And hopefully we come to our senses and decide not to do this again. There is, of course, the fourth alternative, which is the one where neither of us swerves, and in what's become a recurring theme, fiery car crash. Let's put this into a game. I'm the row angst-ridden adolescent. You're the column angst-ridden adolescent. We are two angst-ridden adolescents. And I can either swerve or go straight. And you can either swerve or go straight. If I swerve and you swerve, then it's a tie. Neither of us is a chicken. Neither of us is awesome. We'll say 1 happiness point apiece. If I swerve and you go straight, now I look like a chicken and you look pretty awesome. We'll say 0 happiness points for me and 2 happiness points for you. Being awesome is at least worth 2 happiness points. They tell me. I've never been awesome before. Now, if I go straight and you swerve, it's the same idea. 2 happiness points for me and 0 happiness points for you. And finally, there's the situation where I go straight and you go straight, and right here, -1, -1. These numbers are arbitrary. I only use them to try to stick in your head a little bit, but what matters here is the ordering. Remember, the ordering is what matters, at least for this week and next. So this game conveys brinkmanship, right? So if it's something like the Cuban Missile Crisis, where there's 2 superpowers that don't want to back down, they don't want to look like a chicken, they don't want to lose their reputation, they don't want other countries in the international system to say, hey, the United States is a chicken, because they back down. If they want to maintain their reputation, if they want to look tough, then they can't look like a chicken. But if both countries wind up with massive nuclear stockpiles in the name of looking awesome, that's not so great either. Next thing you know, we find ourselves at the brink of war. So these are 2x2 games. 2x2 games. 2 players, each equipped with 2 actions, and then there's 4 possibilities in the Cartesian product, and we just assign nice, straightforward happiness numbers to those 4 Cartesian product outcomes. These are 2x2 games. They're easy to write down on the back of an envelope. If somebody says to you, I don't fully understand something, you could say, oh, well, that reminds me of a game of chicken. Let me draw it out for you. And then you can tell them the story. You can tell them the fable. And next thing you know, they might have some new insight. You may have shed light on their problem. They might not have known what was going on underneath all the machinery, and you might have just the right angle to show them. Now, not everything in the world is quite this simple. Right? These stories are beginning to look a little bit laughable in the face of all the humiliating complexity of real life. The point is that these abstractions make it easier for us to convey meaning to one another. These truly are fables. They're not supposed to be history. They're not supposed to be encyclopedias. They're supposed to be fables that stick in your head. Will you ever forget Bakker-Stravinsky? Will you ever forget Chicken? Or The Prisoner's Dilemma? They stick in your head. That's the beauty of it. You can't get that fable out of your mind no matter how hard you try at a certain point in time. And my goal as a teacher is to get you just to remember that, so that then once you kind of doodle out, you remember the story, and next thing you know, you can write down the game. Don't memorize the numbers, because the numbers aren't the story. The matrix isn't the story. The story is what I was trying to tell you. The story is the once upon a time. I have one more really interesting once upon a time to show you that'll be relevant for our stories moving forward. So over in the C block, we'll talk about what it might look like for something a little bit more explicitly political. See you there. So here in the C block, I want to talk about a campaign. Once upon a time, there were two people running for office. I'm a candidate, you're a candidate, we are two candidates. You like this idea because anytime somebody saw a picture of me, they would just decide not to vote for me because they're like, I didn't like Shrek that much the first time. And so the basic idea is that we both want to be elected to office. And that's actually all that we care about. We are jaded, we are not ideological, we don't care about anything other than being elected to office, because being elected to office is awesome. You get a Wikipedia page, you get to go to funny lobbying parties, you get to be on TV all the time, as opposed to this crap. You know, being in office is pretty cool. Not being in office is far less cool. They tell me I would never run for office. And so the basic idea is that our action set is going to be which platform we announce. Where on some ideological spectrum do we announce our platform to be? What do we say we're going to do? What do we plan on doing when we go to office? What sort of policies will we support? And the basic idea is that the voters have various preferences over that. And you need to get voters to support you by announcing an ideology that they're on board with. And all that you really care about is getting elected to office. So what I'm going to do to begin with is I'm going to draw up a policy space like we had last week, right? Where we've got a left side of the political spectrum and a right side of the political spectrum. So now the action set isn't going to be left side of the road, right side of the road, but rather choose a platform on these real numbers. Just choose any real number you want to. You could choose a super liberal policy. You could choose a super conservative policy. Doesn't matter. Just choose a policy out of this space. So now the action set is no longer just two things. Now there's an uncountably infinite set of strategies that you might choose between. I'll say that there are 5 voters, which I will then plot in space. I'll go the rightmost one, like a center right, a full-on moderate, a center left, and a far left. Let's just say that those are 5 voters, or 5 kinds of voters in roughly equal proportions in the current election. This is just an introductory version of the fable, okay? And this is just to motivate it. And the idea is they all have absolute value utilities. They all want you to be close. Everybody wants to see a policy that's close to their preferred policy, close to their ideal point. So we have 5 voters, each equipped with an ideal point, ranging 1 through 5. And 2 candidates who are deciding where to put their platforms to try to get these voters to vote for them. That's what candidates do, among lots of other things. So with all of these voters put in this space, I can think about candidate 1 and where they would put their policy on top of the real line. And I can think about candidate 2 and where they would go beneath the line. This is no longer something we can put into a matrix. The idea is that they make a simultaneous platform decision, but this isn't something I can put into a matrix anymore. But just to animate things, suppose that candidate 1 set their policy at the far left. They say, you know what? I'm just going to run a full-on aggressive left campaign. I'm going to do this exactly how voter 1 would want it. Now suppose that candidate 2 decided just to go center left. Well, now let's tally the scores. So voter 1 votes for candidate 1 because we're at voter 1's ideal point. Voter 2 votes for candidate 2 because we're at voter 2's ideal point. The moderate voter votes for 2 because it's closer than the extreme policy of candidate 1. They would rather be at 2. And similarly for the two right voters. So in other words, if those were the strategies chosen, then we would have a 4-1 vote and candidate 2 would win. And then candidate 2 would get 1 happiness point and candidate 1 would get 0 for losing. That's what I'm saying. They just want to win. They just want to win. Now it turns out that if you keep repeating that exercise, what you wind up seeing is that what winds up mattering is being closer to voter 3. And we'll analyze this in excruciating detail next week. But I just want to give you the basic idea here. So voter 3 is what's called the median voter. And voter 3, if you want to get them because they're the decisive voter. If you're closer to voter 3 than the other candidate, then you're closer to 3 and then some other half, right? So if you're at center left and I'm at voter 3, then I get the moderate and everybody on the right. Right? So if you get the middle, then you get the other side for sure. So you win if you get the middle candidate. That's the thing with the spatial model, is with a naive setup like this one, you wind up wanting the middle person. So an interesting question is, if you were choosing your policy in this space, trying to appease some number of voters, but on the understanding that the other candidate is doing the same, which policy would you choose for your platform? That's what we're trying to get at here. Now, this is a relatively plausible first cut fable, but think about everything that it abstracts away from. Think about things that I didn't say, like political party or primary. I didn't talk about that at all. I didn't talk about a filibuster if it's something that has to get through a legislature. All that I said was majority rule for 2 candidates in some policy space based on some voters that are distributed however they are in that policy space. Set your policy and then the voters are automatons. And yet, at least if you're anything like me, even though this is a stupefyingly stupid abstraction, even though this doesn't quite look like what campaigns are really like if you watch cable news, you also obviously know that this is a fable about 2 candidates choosing a policy, right? So it both looks like what we care about, even though we know it doesn't give us everything that we might need to make a full-on perfect prediction. It's a sandbox. But notice that what's interesting about this relative to the others, other than the fact that it's explicitly political, is that the strategy space is much richer. Your set of available actions is now huge. So the basic idea here is that your favorite outcome is winning, your second favorite is tying, like if you're the same distance from the median voter, and your least favorite outcome is losing. So let's think this through visually. I'm just going to do a Cartesian product of these 2 action spaces. So candidate 1 will be on the horizontal axis, and candidate 2 will be on the vertical. This is the Cartesian product of 2 real lines, which is just a plane. And you're like, yeah, I remember that. I had a cold sweat during week 1. I'm having a cold sweat as we speak. Now let's think through where the ties are. I want to start with the ties. If candidate 1 chooses 0, that's the median voter's ideal point. And if candidate 2 does as well, if we're both at 0, then that's a tie. And we both get a half a happiness point. Now, if I choose 1 and you choose 1, if I set my policy at 1 and you set your policy at 1, then that's a tie as well. We're both the same distance from the median voter. The same goes if I set mine at 1 and you set yours at -1. Even though we're on different ends of the spectrum, we're the same distance from the median voter who tosses a coin, and we both get a half a happiness point. So 1, 1 and 1 -1 are both a tie as well. And the same works at -1, 1 and -1, -1. Those are ties. As long as the absolute value of the 2 policies is the same, then we'll be the same distance from the median voter. And so the ties just form this little bow tie situation, right? So there's a tie at 0, 0. And then with these rays emanating out, there's ties that can go to the left or the right, where these are all of the situations where the same distance from 0. Inside of the bow tie, on the inside of this, these are all situations where we're further out than we are up or down. We're further out than we are up or down. That means that candidate 2 is closer than candidate 1 is, right? In particular, think about 1, 1/2, right? Now we're both to the right side of the median voter, but candidate 2, that's you, is closer to the median voter. So long as we're inside of that little bow tie line, candidate 2 wins. And on the outside, that means we're too far up rather relative to where we are out, and candidate 1 wins. So candidate 1 likes to be way outside, candidate 2 likes to be inside, and then the line of demarcation are the ties. So all of this just from some incredibly, stupefyingly simple version of a campaign. Just choosing a platform has a lot of interesting little wrinkles in it if you let it. So I think that that's a really fascinating place for us to end our Book of Fables for the day. Think about all the stories that we've seen. We've seen collective action problem stories. We've seen coordination problem stories. We've seen brinkmanship stories. We've seen can we cooperate even though we both want to peel off stories. We've seen anti-coordination stories. We've seen all sorts of different stories, and we've stared at them long enough to begin to get some interesting hallucinations. There's a lot going on underneath the hood, even though these simple fables are succinct and memorable. Even though The Fox and the Grapes is easy for you to remember, there's an awful lot of drama going on underneath it. I hope that you can start to see that underneath these too, because this is the world that we're living in from here on out. So what do we talk about today? Well, we finally got to games. This class in game theory finally involves some games. There's a lot to be said for that. And so if you look at them one by one, we talked about anti-coordination, coordination, collective action problems, whether they involve sheep or prisoners. We talked about hunters and baseball players and adolescent youths full of angst. We talked about a lot of different kinds of story, but more importantly, we talked about stories. We talked about a particular kind of story, a strategically interdependent story, which, for a lot of political processes, is the most interesting kind of story. Now, we'll be amending these models throughout the class. We'll be adding layer upon layer of new nuance and the associated mathematical apparatus to see that nuance, but every game that we talk about moving forward will have players, actions, and utilities. Those 3 things lie at the core of game theory. And so long as we have utilities that are defined over Cartesian products of action sets, which is to say, so long as our people care about outcomes that aren't just their own choice, then we're in the world of games. Some games are trivial sounding and some aren't, but I hope that the sheep versus prisoners thing, not to mention the baseball and the Bakker-Stravinsky, convinced you that there's all sorts of different important things that can be made trivial. Part of what we do when we write down a game is we try to make it something that's easy for us to remember and hopefully that abstracts away from some of the gruesome details that make it so hard to feel like you know something about something. There's a lot of different ways to know something about something, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert in that. But there's all sorts of people that I admire for how much they seem to know about things. And some of the people that I admire for how much they know about things know lots of facts. They know a whole lot of history, or they can tell you everything that happened during a particular political campaign. They're good at the many. I'm awful at details, if you haven't noticed by now. I can't keep track of anything. And so there's another kind of person that I respect for how much they know. It's the person that can make the complicated things simple. And the person that can make complicated things simple and then show you just how many nuances you can squeeze out of the simple knows just as much, if you ask me, as the fact knower. It's just that sometimes they might have to be told about what it is that they're talking about. They are a little bit more abstract, and if you take them at face value, they might sound a little bit weird to you. But if you just look underneath, if you see what's going on underneath the hood, you'll realize that what they're talking about is how to synthesize, how to take different states of affairs and try to relate them, be they Fox and the Grapes or Prisoner's Dilemma. And look, there's a lot of different ways for you to know lots of things. And I hope that a class like this feels somewhat at odds with some of the others, where you may know lots of facts or you might know the names of lots of things, which is really important, right? In other classes I teach, there's facts and the names of things. But there's also time for us to play in the sandbox. And I think that digging in the dirt, playing in the sand, and trying to figure out what stories you like best is an important part of your education, because otherwise all of these humiliating, complicated facts, all of these seemingly impossible to synthesize things will be out there, and there's no way to organize them. There is no structure, and in particular, there's no way to detect patterns. You won't be able to see the similarity in things unless you can synthesize, and I think that's an important aspect of our humanity. Now, that's just one person's opinion. That's not me speaking to you as a professor. That's me speaking to you as the person that's just giving you random bloviations. But I hope it's something that you'll reflect on, because I want you to appreciate knowledge in all its forms. You may have noticed that we haven't analyzed any of the games. All that I did was sort of run through a laundry list of a bunch of different games, and if you're clever, you could probably figure out just how many different kinds of games that there are. In fact, here's one. For an Alma token, how many different rankings can you come up with in a 2x2 game? How many different 2x2 games are there in terms of the rankings, taking into account the fact that there might be indifference? That's a big number. Don't bother yourself with that until you've finished your problem set, please. I told you who the players are, what they can do, and what they want. I didn't tell you what happens. There were no spoiler alerts given today. And you might be thinking that that means that our enterprise is somewhat incomplete. And it's with a thought like that in mind that I'd like to conclude with a provocative thought. What a story is about and how it ends are two foundationally different things. It's true that you need to know ultimately how a story ends in order for you to be able to make it useful. You need to know what the punchline is in order to know what kind of prediction to make out in the real world. But that doesn't mean that it's what the story was about in the first place. I think a lot of people want to rush to the ending. When you think about the Book of Fables, when you think about the fox and the grapes, it's true that there's a punchline. It's true that at the end the fox says those grapes are probably sour anyway. But what makes you remember it isn't just that. What makes you remember it is that it's a tale about what it is to strive for something. What it is to see something that you intuitively want on a fundamental level. I see grapes and I want them. And what is it to chase after that, knowing that you want the grapes and you can take the action of going after them. The punchline is what provides the moral of the fable, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it tells you what you need to know about it. If I just told you the punchline of The Fox and the Grapes without telling you what the story was, then it wouldn't stick with you. If all I said to you was that sometimes people chase after things that they want very much, and then after they fail, they tell themselves they didn't want the thing in the first place, well, I could tell you that in words, or I can give you the fable to try to envelop it with some dramatic tension that makes it easier for you to remember, makes it easier for me to convey meaning to you, makes it easier to draw distinctions, makes it easier to draw relations. In other words, The Fox and the Grapes isn't just about sour grapes, it's about the fox. It's about the grapes, and it's about the climbing. The same goes for literature, right? So Waiting for Godot is a pretty amazing 20th century play that is what you might call sort of sad, in a sense. Waiting for Godot first opened in 1953 after World War II, when a lot of people, artists included, were thinking that life was pretty meaningless. And so Waiting for Godot, if you just skip ahead to the ending, doesn't tell you everything you need to know, because a lot of the punchline, and I won't spoil it too much, a lot of the punchline of Waiting for Godot is at the end you go, well, what was that about? And if you just get to the what was that about Waiting for Godot, then you fail to appreciate all of the amazing things that happened along the way. You forget all the speeches, you forget all the dialogue, you forget the characters that you fell in love with. If all you do is wait for the punchline and then walk away disappointedly if it doesn't give you what you wanted, then you totally miss the point. Because it isn't pointless. There is a point at the end. It's that the point is meaninglessness. Relatedly, there's a great piece of music, if you want to call that, by the 20th century composer John Cage. It's called 4 minutes and 33 seconds, or just 4:33. And what happens in a performance of 4:33 is the orchestra sits on the stage, the conductor comes out, the conductor lifts the baton, and then for 4 minutes and 33 seconds there is silence. The orchestra plays nothing. If what you think you came for was just hearing the music and feeling pretty good as you tap your foot to it, then that means nothing to you. And maybe it is truly awful. There's a lot of people that respond to 4:33 very angrily, and that's fine. I'm just giving you a view on this. But what John Cage had to say about it was that he had nothing to say, and he was saying it. That means that the punchline doesn't exist. It's vacuous. But the fact that it's vacuous is itself the story. Whether the prisoners tattle on one another we're going to find out next week. Whether the shepherds let their sheep eat all the grass, we'll talk about that next week. Whether we get a stag or a hare, we'll talk about all of that. But that isn't what the stories were about. That isn't what the stories were. A game is a set of players, a set of actions available to each player, and a set of utilities. A play is a set of dramatis personae, the things that they care about, and what they might be able to do about that. it's not just the ending. I don't know. I watch shows, you watch shows, we all watch shows, or you read books, or you listen to music, and if the end feeling is the only thing that winds up mattering to you, then I don't know. Lots of movies have twist endings, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the twist ending is what the movie was all about. It's cool that it has one, you remember it, there's an interesting punchline, but there's so much more to it than that. And it's with that in mind that I have decided to postpone analysis for a week. We will not be talking about the usual method of analyzing games like this, Nash equilibrium, until next week. Because what a story is and how it ends are two foundationally different things. And that isn't just a game theory thing. There's a larger metaphor, and that larger metaphor is that some things have no ending. For example, your understanding of things. Hopefully there won't be a day that you learn the last thing that you're going to learn. Except for the last day that you're on Earth, but that's a different story. And if you're just waiting to get something, if you're just waiting for the end, if you're just waiting for Godot, then you're never going to get the punchline. And the time that you put into it won't have mattered. The same goes for a lot of things that don't end. Just a second, I'm sweating profusely out of my eyes. I say all this because it seems to me that a lot of people want to acquire things. They want to get to the ending of something. They want to finish their degree. They want to get a job. They want to get something on their LSAT. And that's fine. And I want you all to go do awesome things. And you have to climb the ladder to get there. But there will come a time where you get to the top of some hill on the way up the mountain and you say, what was this for? What's the punchline? And the whole point was going up the mountain was what was important. Sorry, struggling very hard. I can't believe I made it to week six without crying, actually. The seasoned vets know that I cry pretty often. And if I can finish this, I'll say that this is why I've chosen to teach you kind of the way that I do, is that I want the journey to be something. I don't want the last fact that you learn in the class. I don't want week 15 to be the last thing in your head. I want every step up the mountain to be meaningful to you. And I know that it isn't. I'm not stupid. I mean, I'm stupid, but I'm not stupid. That's stupid. I know that sometimes you're just trying to get something done. I know that sometimes you're just trying to get a pass. I know that sometimes you're just trying to get an Alma. But I hope that sometimes each step by arduous step means something to you, because your knowledge of game theory, your knowledge of political science, your knowledge of the social sciences, your knowledge of people will never end. The growth of that knowledge is going to be, I hope, one of the most foundational aspects of your life. And if you sit around waiting for the punchline, you're going to be disappointed. That's why I mean it every time I say I can't wait to go through this week of problem set with you. I can't wait to see you struggle. I can't wait to see you get stronger. I can't wait to see you get faster and more nimble. I can't wait to see you. And I hope it's something that you've come to appreciate too. So we have some stories to appreciate but not finish. I'm looking forward to that, going through that with you. But in the meantime, thanks for watching.